This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises Incorporated. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
Welcome, everyone, to the Native American Language Resource Center podcast number 6. Today, we're going to be talking about evaluation. We've been doing this summer series on how to start a Native American language immersion school. And we are very honored to have Joan LaFrance here to join us to talk about program evaluation. Welcome, Joan.
Hello, welcome to Seattle. Happy to join you.
Thank you. So could you please tell us a little bit about your work and what experiences you have with program evaluation?
I have a firm, it's called Neckanock Consulting, and Neckanock is Ojibwe for turtle, and I'm a member of the Turtle Mountain Band Chippewa, so that's behind my my decision to name my firm Neckanock Consulting. I did a lot of work in basically program development, program administration. And one day I was told that we were going to have an external evaluator walk in and evaluate what we were doing. That's when I worked for United Indians of All Tribes Foundation, doing curriculum development. And when I heard that, I wasn't very happy. I had a reaction to that word evaluator, judgment. I just didn't care for it at all. However, the young man who came in and did the evaluation left me with so much information and so much help that at that point I was thinking of going back to graduate school. And I raised my hand and said, I want to do what you do. And so I went back and eventually got all the credentials that I needed. I specialized mostly in evaluating in Indian country. I do have some that take me out into Micronesia, some projects, but they're indigenous based. And the focus of most of my work has turned out to be with tribal colleges over the years. And through that association, I worked with the Tribal College Consortium, American Indian Tribal College Consortium 8, and we built initially a training program based on a manual we've done called the Indigenous Evaluation Framework. And so I basically use that to guide my work and program evaluation.
Well, I wanted to ask the next question I wanted to ask you is your thoughts on what the purpose of evaluation is.
Well, I think a lot of people have that reaction I initially had. You hear evaluation and you think judgment, but that is far from the purpose of a good evaluation. It's about learning, and the purpose of evaluation is to learn from what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned from that being evaluated in a program that I was running, which was involved with curriculum development, and I had no background in it. His observation and his information, one, validated that we were doing a good job, but he gave me a lot of information from which I learned. So evaluation is about learning.
Yeah.
It's about telling your story and taking time to reflect on that story so that you are learning.
Are there, when you are working within indigenous communities and going into programs that are, based on indigenous practices, are there different sort of perspectives or strategies that you use in evaluation within those communities or within those types of programs?
Yes, I would say they are not ones you learn when you take the course and how to do evaluation. Because the first thing is proper protocol. I think we all know that it's kind of an ironic tension, I call it. Evaluators are trained to ask a lot of questions. And the first thing that you really don't want to do, I think, as a part of proper protocol, is come into a community and have your expertise stamped across your face, and you start asking a lot of questions. So I think the first thing that's different is you've got to honor protocol. You've got to enter the right way, respectfully, and oftentimes it's a challenge to find a way to have conversation and not just questioning, and bringing a small gift,
Oh,
sharing your own background,
mhm.
inviting them to talk about their story.
That's awesome. How can evaluation support emerging schools and programs?
Well, since evaluation is about learning and reflection, it can do a lot of good. Because it gives you a chance as a program director, as staff, as participants, to think about what's going on and to think about it in what we call evaluative thinking. A reflection that looks at what works. What can we try that might address some things we're not happy? So it's a great help because it just helps you think about and reflect on what you're doing and what you might do differently, or to reward yourself or your staff and your program for what's working and celebrating that.
Awesome. So can you provide some examples of what next steps might look like once you've completed an evaluation?
Yeah, well, the very sad thing is oftentimes the next step is a report is written and filed away.
Yeah.
That's to the federal funder or the foundation that's funding, and that's it. So I think the next step has to be incorporated in what the first step is.
Mm,
That is a real question about why do you want to do this evaluation? Is it basically to satisfy an external resource request that you do it? And that's the only reason you're doing it? And
yeah.
I guess the next step is to file that evaluation, check it off on your checklist, and go on. But if your first step is to actually own the idea that you might gain from this evaluation,
Hmm.
and after it is done, your next step is to think about what you learned and how you want that to have influence on your program.
Mhm.
Evaluation alone is not going to change the program, but it can influence what's going on in the program.
Mhm.
And that influence can be very, very positive.
Mm.
It's time to take stock and think about it and reflect and learn and apply learning. When I was first introduced to the staff, I was introduced as our evaluator. And I mean, it just put up a clear message as to what the program director thought.
Right.
Over the years, as I would visit and I have a time to interview her for collecting data, she leaned back one day and she said, I really like it when you come to visit because you take time for me to think about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I have an opportunity to reflect on it.
Yeah.
You write a report, but oftentimes your influence is in the process of getting people to think about and reflect on what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that. I remember several times, you get so inundated by the day-to-day, challenges and work that needs to happen in order to run a school. So to take time to really have a conversation and reflect is very it's great. I mean, it helps you, sort of think through maybe next steps and have somebody to talk to about what you're facing, and then be able to reflect back maybe the next steps that you could take, or what you could do better. So that really resonates with me. What are the common missteps that you've seen in evaluation?
Well, we've alluded to, I think one of the main ones is that you fulfill an external request, you check it off on your checklist, and that's it. So the most common mistake is think about evaluation as this requirement, you're going to do it and you do it, and then that's it. You don't take the time to understand. I think another real common misunderstanding is to think about it as the time for people to come in and judge you,
Mm,
rather than seeing it as your opportunity to learn. I think that's a common mistake to think of evaluation in that. I've oftentimes asked people if we could find a different word,
yeah,
because there's so much baggage in that one.
yeah,
So it's a time for storytelling, and good Indian stories have lessons in them.
yeah. I mean, with that said, and like you're saying, like don't make it don't let it just be about fulfilling an outside requirement. Do you have any suggestions on how to embed evaluation into sort of the daily running of your program or your school?
Well, if we think about evaluation as reflection,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can't reflect daily because you're doing,
Right.
but I would take your schedule and look at it and learn how to have a meeting at least quarterly or semi-annually
Mm,
where your purpose is to reflect, not to plan the next month's activities. It's to reflect and build it into the schedule. It is something that you could do with your evaluator.
yeah.
So somebody can facilitate that reflection, but build it into the schedule and in a way that allows you to continue to be very, very busy, but to take a breath and make it a time where you can feel like you're laying down implementation
Right.
and you're going to pick up your cup of coffee and look at reflection.
Yeah. Who do you think should be engaged in that process of evaluation? How do you determine who should be at the table, sort of reflecting, and how best to engage them in that reflection?
Well, I think that we want to look at engagement in continuums. It's
Mhm.
like, who do you engage? Is it just staff? Or do you go down and engage more of your participants, an advisory committee, your board, if you're a school? And ideally, in Indigenous evaluation, we would like to make sure that in that reflection, we're including the community that we're serving.
Mhm.
Be that a representative or two that doesn't feel overwhelmed by the staff.
Yeah.
So a lone parent might not be what you want, but you might want two or three.
Yeah.
But you want to look at what it is how it is that you can get that participatory element in there. And you may not need to do it every time you reflect,
Yeah.
but if you can, that would be ideal. Because their voice is the one that you need to hear.
Yeah. That's awesome. What advice would you give a school that is wanting to conduct an evaluation?
Well, if you're going to hire an evaluator, then my advice is to be cautious in that process. Look for people who have experience in Indian country,
Mhm.
and understand the idea of protocol. And if you're reeling it internally, which you can do, but if your organization is located within a larger organization, um, a tribal authority,
Mhm.
or a school district, there might be within that a person that you can hire internally or work with internally. So you have to make that decision. Is this an external evaluation? Or are we using somebody internal?
Right. So when you're, I mean, sort of, that's a great segue to the next question. When you're looking to hire an evaluator, what are some of the things you should consider when you are searching for the right fit, I guess, in an evaluator?
The level of comfort you have with the person,
Mm,
the ability of the person to be a listener. We tend to be good talkers.
yeah.
The openness of the person to just spend time with you
Mhm.
and your program before that's all part of the evaluation, but before the thing that feels like evaluation does happen.
Yeah.
They'll come to a parent meeting as a observer. And I don't like that word, but that's out of the lingo. But
Yeah.
as a guest, that's it, as a guest. So they can take time to see people in their own comfort and setting.
Mhm.
I've often said, one of the great ways is to join any kind of lunch. Usually you can pay for a meal and you can sit down and chat. And I think we're very welcoming as Indian people. So that's some advice that we give. Try not to be your only entree as just your official title of the evaluation.
Yeah.
If you're also a person with your own backstory, your own reasons for why you became an evaluator, with your own relatives and family, and figuring out how you're related, if at all, and who knows who.
Yeah.
That kind of entree is important.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is that like that relationship building from the beginning is crucial for working within Native communities. I mean, not just Native, but I mean, it's definitely a good practice wherever you go is to build that relationship. What advice would you give someone for working with an evaluator?
Kind of the reverse. First of all, be clear as to why you want this evaluation. And that goes back to, are you checking off that requirement? To be aware that evaluators are not there to judge you. So you have to be open to the idea that you're going to learn this process. And that this process is important to the growth of your organization.
Yeah.
And then the second I would say is obviously you want somebody who knows what they're doing. They understand evaluations. They have a level of experience, and you want to see what that experience is. And fundamental to that is that experience in Indian country.
Mm-hmm.
It is one in which you want to be sure that they are aware of the way you make that entree, the protocols.
Yeah. Yeah. That leads me to another question. Like, how do I know if I'm talking to an evaluator or we're having a conversation deciding whether or not, we want to work with them or not? What are some of the pieces of work I should be looking for in their maybe proposal or in them talking to me about the work that they were doing? Are there standard evaluation, I guess, chunks of work or scope of work that I should be looking for when I'm trying to select a evaluator?
I think there are two things. One, you mentioned proposal. So does the proposal look like they know what evaluation is? We'll use this process to collect data. This is how we will analyze our data. This is the report process. In the proposal that you can get, and then references, you get an idea of their basic competency in understanding evaluation.
Right.
But it is in the talk story time in the interview that you need to get an idea of their understanding of how you enter an Indian community as an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
And you get an idea of what kind of comfort level you have with them.
Right.
I do believe that staff and directors can be good gatekeepers. So is it somebody you feel comfortable entering the gate
Yeah.
just from your own experience? I've worked with colleagues that by virtue of this being assigned to an organization where I felt like I had to be a gatekeeper so that they would not be,
Uh-huh.
lovely as they were, they just were a person when they met somebody was full of questions,
Yeah.
and didn't understand. Sometimes people go through a lot of education and are not out of an Indian community, just like to have that airtime and look for people like that are not good candidates. People who have shown you that they know how to tell you who they are without just using their credentials.
Yeah. Is there any other advice you'd like to give our participants as it relates to evaluation and working with an evaluator or selecting an evaluator or the process of evaluation, things we should look for that are best practices and maybe some that are not so great practices that we should, sort of steer away from? Any other advice?
I would go back to thinking about what kind of organization are you?
Mm,
Are you an organization that values what I call evaluative thinking or organizational growth? And that is an internal conversation.
yeah.
That is where we are an organization that values reflection and taking time to use that reflection to influence what we're going to do.
Mhm.
So first of all, get your own headset thinking about why and what evaluation is for you. And then you think about how that evaluation will be done.
Mhm.
And obviously an external evaluator is important.
Yeah.
I've done some training in tribal colleges on how to do evaluation. But the truth of the matter is, our organizations are not full of a lot of resources that we have time to put a new job in front of people who are already doing work. So
Yeah.
the odds are you're probably going to go outside. So once you're committed to the fact that you want to learn from evaluation, when you go outside, take that time to see if you find a person with whom that ability to be a storyteller with you and observes the proper protocol for entering into your community, and has what you can tell is experience and a background. Those are the kind of things you want to look for. Somebody you feel comfortable bringing into your community.
Great. So is there anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to share?
I would like to go back to that idea of, can we find a different word?
Mm,
Evaluation, especially in a situation where it's education, is so much connected to grading and to, us passing a judgment. And my main advice is to just get that idea of judgment out of the thinking when you think about evaluation. In fact, we don't oftentimes have clear translation
mm,
for evaluation in the language, but we think about it in terms of learning. So I would advise people to take that time before you start evaluation to think about how you deal with that word. How do you feel comfortable with the idea of reflection, and how committed are you to growing? Put yourself in that mindset organizationally, and then partner with evaluators rather than the idea of bringing in an external evaluator. Partner with your evaluator.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your information, your knowledge, your experience. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
would encourage people to, if you want to look at the Indigenous Evaluation Framework that's on the portal of the American Evaluation Association.
Yes.
They changed their website, so it's a little bit difficult to find it.
That'd be great. And we'll make sure to include that URL in the podcast as an attachment so people can access that framework. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you so much. And this is a wrap on our podcast number 6. Again, we really appreciate you sharing your experience, your expertise, as well as your time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.